3 days before my younger sister's wedding, I received an invoice instead of an invitation. At first, I honestly thought someone had made a mistake. The elegant cream-colored envelope carried my parents' return address, complete with gold lettering and a wax seal embossed with Ashley and Brandon's initials. It looked exactly like the wedding invitations everyone else had proudly shared on social media. I smiled as I opened it, expecting to find a heartfelt note from my little sister despite the distance that had grown between us over the years. Instead, a folded sheet of paper slipped into my lap. Across the top, in bold letters, were the words VIP Family Seating Invoice. Beneath it, someone had carefully itemized every charge. Front row family table, $8,000. Minimum wedding gift required, $2,000. Payment due within 48 hours. Failure to pay before the deadline would result in the immediate cancellation of my invitation. For several seconds, I simply stared at the page, convinced it had to be a joke. Then my phone rang. My mother's name appeared on the screen. The moment I answered, she didn't say hello. "Rebecca, I assume you've received your invoice." I laughed quietly. "Please tell me Ashley is playing some kind of prank." My mother's voice remained completely serious. "This isn't a joke. Weddings are expensive. Everyone in the family has to contribute." I looked down at the paper again. "You're charging your own daughter $10,000 just to attend her sister's wedding? Don't be dramatic," she replied. "You're successful. You can afford it. Brandon's family expects a certain standard, and Ashley deserves the wedding she's always dreamed about." Before I could answer, my father took the phone from her. "Listen carefully, Rebecca. If you refuse to pay, don't bother coming. We won't embarrass ourselves by having a family member who refuses to support her own sister." His words should have hurt me. Instead, they reminded me that nothing had really changed. Ever since we were children, Ashley had always been the center of my parents' world. Every birthday, every holiday, every family celebration somehow revolved around what she wanted. When I earned scholarships, they congratulated Ashley for being supportive. When I worked 2 jobs to pay my college tuition, they used the money they saved to buy Ashley her first luxury car. When I started my own business, they called it luck. When Ashley maxed out 3 credit cards, they called it bad timing. For years, I convinced myself that if I worked harder, became more successful, and stopped complaining, they might finally treat me like their daughter instead of their emergency bank account. Looking at that invoice, I realized I had been wrong all along. This wasn't about helping Ashley. It was about reminding me where they believed I belonged. I calmly folded the paper and placed it back inside the envelope. "I'm not paying," I said. My father laughed. "Then don't expect to be welcome at the wedding." The call ended before I could respond. I sat in complete silence for nearly a minute before opening my laptop. Within seconds, I logged into the executive portal of Lux Venues, the company that owned one of the most exclusive wedding estates in California. Ashley, my parents, Brandon, and every single wedding guest believed someone else owned that breathtaking venue. None of them knew the truth. None of them knew I had quietly purchased Lux Venues 4 years earlier after building my company from nothing. They also didn't know that 6 months ago, my father had secretly come to my office begging me to waive the $150,000 venue fee because they couldn't afford Ashley's dream wedding. He had promised that one day he would tell everyone the truth and thank me properly. Instead, he sent me a $10,000 invoice. I clicked on Ashley's wedding reservation, reviewed the contract one final time, and moved my cursor over a single button labeled "Remove Executive Courtesy Discount." The system displayed one final warning, asking me to confirm my decision. I smiled quietly before clicking yes. Somewhere across the city, a brand new invoice worth $150,000 had just been generated, and my family had absolutely no idea their perfect wedding had begun falling apart. The next morning, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. I ignored every call until I saw Brandon's name appear on the screen. We had only met a handful of times over the years, but unlike the rest of my family, he had always treated me with genuine respect. "Curious," I answered. Before I could say hello, he spoke in a confused voice. "Rebecca, did something happen with the venue?" I glanced at my laptop without saying a word. Why are you asking? There was a long pause. The venue's accounting department just sent us an invoice for $150,000. Ashley is hysterical. Your parents keep insisting it's some kind of computer error. I calmly leaned back in my chair. Maybe they should call the venue. Brandon sighed. We've been trying all morning. They said the executive courtesy discount was removed overnight and that only the company owner has authority to do that. I thanked him for calling and ended the conversation before he could ask anything else. Less than 10 minutes later, my office receptionist buzzed my private line. Miss Carter, your father is here. He says it's an emergency. Send him in. My father burst through the door without knocking. His face was pale, and the confidence he had displayed the previous evening had completely disappeared. He slammed the invoice onto my desk. Did you do this? He demanded. I looked down at the paper before looking back at him. Do what? The venue is demanding $150,000. They say our discount vanished overnight. I shrugged. That sounds expensive. He lowered his voice. Rebecca, please. This isn't funny. For the first time in years, I noticed genuine fear in his eyes. Not concern for Ashley, not concern for the family, fear of public humiliation. Brandon's parents believed he had already secured one of the most exclusive wedding venues in California at an unbelievable price. If the wedding collapsed because the balance couldn't be paid, everyone would discover my parents had exaggerated their financial success for years. My father sat down across from me and rubbed his forehead. You don't understand. Brandon's family already invited more than 400 guests. We can't lose that venue. I quietly folded my hands together. Then pay the invoice. He looked at me as though I had insulted him. You know we can't. I studied him for several seconds before asking a question I had wanted to ask my entire life. Why is there always money for Ashley, but never enough to treat me fairly? He looked away without answering. Instead, he tried another approach. You're her sister. Families help each other. I almost laughed. Interesting. Last night you told me I wasn't welcome at the wedding unless I paid $10,000 just to attend. His face reddened. That was different. How? Silence filled the office. My father couldn't explain the difference because there wasn't one. For years, helping the family had meant one thing. Rebecca pays, Ashley receives. Finally, he stood and walked toward my desk. Rebecca, please. Just call whoever owns this company and ask them to restore the discount. We'll figure everything else out later. I looked directly into his eyes. You still think I know the owner? Don't play games. He forced a smile. You've always been good at networking. That's how you got the discount in the first place. I slowly stood, walked toward the floor-to-ceiling window overlooking downtown Los Angeles, and watched the morning traffic below. 4 years earlier, I had purchased Lux Venues after selling my technology company for more money than I had ever imagined possible. I deliberately kept my ownership private because I wanted the business to succeed on its own reputation, not because of my name. Even my family believed I was nothing more than a senior event consultant earning a comfortable salary. They had never bothered asking what I actually did. They simply assumed Ashley was the successful one because she married into wealth, while I worked quietly behind the scenes. My father broke the silence. Rebecca, say something. I turned back toward him. Do you remember 6 months ago when you came to this office? He nodded cautiously. You told me if I helped save Ashley's wedding, one day you'd proudly tell everyone what I had done for this family. His expression immediately changed. He remembered every word. You also promised, I continued, that you would never treat me like an ATM again. His shoulders slowly dropped. Rebecca, I raised one hand to stop him. You broke your promise before the wedding even happened. At that exact moment, my receptionist buzzed again. Miss Carter, Ashley is here. Before I could answer, the office door suddenly swung open. Ashley walked inside wearing designer sunglasses, carrying her phone in one hand and the $150,000 invoice in the other. She didn't look frightened anymore. She looked furious. She threw the invoice across my desk and pointed directly at me. Fix this, she snapped. or I'll make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of sister you really are." She still believed I was just an employee with connections. She had absolutely no idea she was threatening the woman who owned the entire company. Ashley stood in the middle of my office like she owned the place. She didn't greet me. She didn't ask a single question. She simply pointed at the invoice lying on my desk as if I were one of her employees. "You have until the end of today to fix this," she said coldly. "I don't care who you have to call." I looked at her calmly before sliding the invoice back across the desk. "I think you're talking to the wrong person." She laughed sarcastically. "Stop pretending. Dad told me you're the one who arranged the discount. I introduced him to the venue months ago." "Exactly," she snapped. "So call your contact and tell them to stop acting ridiculous." Before I could answer, my father stepped forward. "Rebecca, this has gone far enough. Brandon's parents are demanding answers. They're starting to think we lied about paying for the venue." I looked at both of them without saying a word. Neither one had asked how I was doing. Neither one apologized for the $10,000 invoice they had sent me the night before. Their only concern was saving Ashley's wedding. Ashley crossed her arms. "Do you know what's happening because of you? My future mother-in-law thinks my family is hiding something. Brandon hasn't stopped asking questions all morning." I smiled faintly. "Maybe he should." Ashley's face immediately hardened. "What does that mean?" "Nothing." She slammed both hands onto my desk. "Don't play games with me." At that exact moment, my assistant knocked gently before opening the door. "Miss Carter, Mr. Brandon Collins, and Mrs. Diane Collins have arrived for their scheduled meeting." Ashley frowned. "Scheduled meeting?" My assistant nodded. "Yes. They've been scheduled with Miss Carter for over a week." Ashley looked confused before turning back toward me. "Why would Brandon's family have a meeting with you?" I simply replied, "Send them in." Seconds later, Brandon entered with his mother, Diane Collins, a woman well known in California's luxury hospitality industry. She greeted me warmly before extending her hand. "Rebecca, thank you for seeing us on such short notice." Ashley's eyes widened. She had never seen Diane greet anyone in our family with that level of respect. Before Ashley could speak, Diane looked around the office. "I assume you've already seen the revised invoice." "I have," I answered. Diane sighed. "My concern isn't the amount. My concern is why the executive courtesy agreement disappeared overnight." Ashley quickly interrupted. "It's obviously some accounting mistake. Rebecca is fixing it." Diane looked at Ashley, then back at me. "Is she?" I remained silent. Brandon watched me carefully before speaking. "Rebecca, can you tell us what's actually happening?" Before I could answer, my father forced a nervous laugh. "It's just a misunderstanding. Rebecca knows someone inside the company." Diane slowly turned toward him. "Really?" she asked. "Because according to the accounting department, only one person in the entire company has authority to remove an executive courtesy agreement." The room became completely silent. My father swallowed hard. Then, perhaps Rebecca could speak to that person. Diane's expression didn't change. "She doesn't need to." Ashley frowned. "Why not?" Diane looked directly at her. "Because the accounting department informed me that the decision came directly from the owner's executive account." Ashley looked back at me and laughed. "See? That's exactly why Rebecca needs to call the owner." Diane's eyes narrowed slightly. "Ashley," she said quietly, "do you actually know what your sister does for a living?" Ashley shrugged. "She's some kind of event consultant." My father quickly nodded. "She's very good at getting discounts." Diane slowly looked at Brandon before letting out a quiet sigh. "I think all of you have misunderstood something." She reached into her leather folder, removed a corporate profile, and placed it on my desk. The first page displayed the Lux Venue's corporate structure. At the very top, beneath the company logo, appeared one name in bold letters: Rebecca Carter, founder, chief executive officer, and majority owner. Ashley stared at the page without blinking. My father's mouth slowly fell open. Brandon looked from the document to me, suddenly understanding every unanswered question from the past 24 hours. Diane calmly folded her hands. There is no accounting mistake, she said. The woman you've been threatening all morning isn't an employee. She paused just long enough for the silence to become unbearable before finishing her sentence. She owns the entire company. Nobody in the room said a word. Then Ashley looked at me with a mixture of disbelief and panic before whispering the first honest question she had asked all day. Rebecca, what have we done? For several long seconds, nobody in the office moved. Ashley stared at the corporate profile as if the words printed across the page belonged to someone else. My father slowly reached for the document with trembling hands, reading the title again and again. Founder, Chief Executive Officer, Majority Owner. His confident expression disappeared completely. He looked at me the same way people look at a stranger they suddenly realize they never really knew. Ashley finally broke the silence with a nervous laugh. This isn't funny, Rebecca. I said nothing. Diane calmly slid another folder across the conference table. These are public corporate records filed with the state of California. You're welcome to verify every page. Ashley grabbed the folder and flipped through it desperately, hoping to find some mistake. Instead, every page carried my name, every ownership certificate, every annual report, every corporate filing. 4 years of legal documents proving that the woman she believed was just another employee had quietly built one of the most successful luxury venue companies on the West Coast. My father slowly sat down without saying a word. For the first time in my life, he looked completely defeated. Brandon looked at me with genuine confusion. Rebecca, why didn't you ever tell anyone? I answered honestly. No one ever asked. The room became quiet again. That simple sentence hurt my parents more than any accusation ever could. They had spent years talking about Ashley's career, Ashley's relationships, Ashley's future, while never once showing real interest in mine. They assumed they already knew everything because they had never cared enough to ask. Ashley suddenly slammed the folder shut. Fine, she snapped. You're rich. Congratulations. Now stop acting petty and put the discount back. Diane slowly turned toward her. Ashley. What? Ashley replied impatiently. She's my sister. She can afford it. Diane's voice became noticeably colder. That's exactly the problem. You still believe this is her responsibility. Ashley crossed her arms. Families help each other. I couldn't help smiling at those familiar words. Interesting, I said quietly. Yesterday your family told me I wasn't welcome at your wedding unless I paid $10,000 just to attend. Ashley rolled her eyes. That was different. No, I replied. The only difference is that yesterday you thought I needed you. Today you know you need me. My father finally found his voice. Rebecca, we made a mistake. I looked at him without speaking. We were under pressure, he continued. Brandon's family expected something extraordinary. Ashley got carried away. We all said things we shouldn't have said. Before I could respond, Diane calmly opened another folder and removed the original executive courtesy agreement. Mr. Carter, she said, perhaps you should explain something. My father frowned. Explain what? Diane turned the contract toward everyone at the table. 6 months ago, you personally signed this agreement requesting a full executive courtesy discount worth $150,000. Ashley looked shocked. Dad, you told us Brandon's family was paying for the venue. My father looked away. Brandon slowly looked at his future father-in-law. You told my family the same thing. Nobody answered him. Diane continued reading from the contract. In your written request, you stated that your family was experiencing temporary financial difficulties and promised to keep Miss Carter's generosity confidential until after the wedding. Ashley's face slowly lost its color. You lied to me? She whispered. My father immediately tried to defend himself. I was protecting your happiness. No, Brandon interrupted for the first time. You were protecting your image. The office fell silent again. Then Diane reached into the folder one final time and placed a second document beside the agreement. There is one more contract all of you should read before asking Rebecca for another favor. My father looked down at the unfamiliar paperwork. It carried Lux Venues' legal letterhead and my signature as Chief Executive Officer. "What's this?" he asked cautiously. I calmly folded my hands together. "It's the updated agreement my legal department prepared this morning." Ashley quickly grabbed it before anyone else could. She skimmed through the first page, smiled with obvious relief, and pushed it toward my father. "Just sign it." He barely glanced at the document before picking up the pen. Neither of them noticed the paragraph highlighted halfway down the final page. Diane noticed it immediately. She quietly looked at me but said nothing. My father signed his name. Ashley signed beneath his. They believed they had just restored their dream wedding. In reality, they had just signed the document that would ultimately destroy everything they had spent years trying to protect. Ashley practically skipped out of my office with a smile on her face, convinced the nightmare was over. My father followed close behind, holding the freshly signed agreement as though it were nothing more than another piece of routine paperwork. Neither of them had bothered reading beyond the first page. They believed they had pressured me into restoring the executive courtesy discount, just as they had pressured me into solving every financial crisis they had created over the years. Brandon and Diane remained behind after the elevator doors closed. Diane quietly looked at me before asking, "Did they actually read what they signed?" I smiled faintly. "No." She slowly shook her head. "I didn't think so." Brandon looked genuinely uncomfortable. "Rebecca, what exactly is in that agreement?" I opened the duplicate copy lying on my desk and turned to the highlighted section. "Nothing unfair," I replied. "Only accountability." Brandon stepped closer while Diane adjusted her glasses and began reading aloud. "In consideration of the executive courtesy discount, the clients acknowledge that any false statements, public defamation, intentional reputational damage, fraudulent misrepresentation, or deliberate interference with Lux Venues, its officers, employees, or ownership shall result in the immediate termination of all discounts and services. The clients further agree to reimburse all losses, legal expenses, and damages arising from such conduct." Brandon slowly lowered the contract. "That's a very strong clause." "It's a standard protection," I answered. "Luxury venues survive on reputation. One false accusation can cost millions in future business." Diane nodded. "Completely enforceable." Brandon looked at me again. "Do you think they'll actually violate it?" Before I could answer, my phone vibrated on the desk. It was a notification from social media. Ashley had just uploaded a brand new video. The title immediately caught my attention. "My own sister is trying to destroy my wedding." I opened the video without saying a word. Ashley sat inside her car, tears carefully running down her cheeks while dramatic music played softly in the background. "I never imagined I'd have to tell this story," she began. "My sister has always been jealous of me. Ever since Brandon proposed, she's been trying to ruin the happiest moment of my life." Brandon's face immediately changed. "What?" Ashley continued speaking directly into the camera. "She works for our wedding venue and abused her position to cancel our family discount because she couldn't stand seeing me happy. Now she's demanding $150,000 just to prove she has power over us." I quietly paused the video after only 40 seconds. Brandon looked stunned. "None of that is true." Diane's expression hardened. "She didn't just exaggerate, she lied." My phone continued vibrating every few seconds as the video spread online. Hundreds of comments appeared almost immediately. "Your sister is disgusting. She's trying to bankrupt her own family. Money changes people." Some viewers even began posting one-star reviews targeting Lux Venues despite having never visited one of our properties. My marketing director called less than 15 minutes later. "Rebecca, we're getting flooded with negative reviews and cancellation requests. Several clients are asking whether the accusations are true." I calmly thanked her and ended the call. Diane folded the contract shut and looked directly at Brandon. "Now you understand why this clause exists." Brandon slowly nodded, unable to hide his disappointment. "Ashley knows the truth. She knows Rebecca owns the company. She knows Dad lied. Why would she post something like this?" I answered quietly, "Because she still believes public sympathy is stronger than the truth." I stood and walked toward the floor-to-ceiling window, overlooking the city below. Thousands of people were already sharing Ashley's story, judging me without hearing a single fact. Years earlier, something like this would have terrified me. Today, it only confirmed exactly what I had expected. Ashley had violated the contract less than 30 minutes after signing it. Without turning around, I spoke to my executive assistant through the office intercom. Emily. Yes, miss. Carter? Call our legal department. Right away. Tell them to preserve every post, every comment, every video, and every review connected to Ashley Carter's accusations. Emily hesitated. Do you want us to respond publicly? I smiled slightly as I watched the city disappear beneath the evening rain. No. Brandon looked confused. You're not going to defend yourself? I slowly shook my head. Not online. Diane already understood. She closed the contract, looked at her son, and quietly said, "The smartest people don't argue on social media." She then looked back at me. They argue in court. At that exact moment, another notification appeared on my phone. Ashley had just posted a second video. This one was even more damaging than the first, because for the first time, she mentioned my company by name. She had no idea that with those few emotional sentences, she had just handed my attorneys everything they needed to destroy her case before it ever reached a courtroom. Ashley's second video spread even faster than the first. By sunrise, it had been viewed more than 3 million times. Television bloggers, wedding influencers, and gossip pages repeated the same headline without verifying a single fact. Luxury venue CEO tries to destroy her own sister's wedding. My marketing director arrived in my office carrying a thick folder filled with screenshots. We've documented everything, she said. Over 12,000 defamatory comments, more than 400 fake one-star reviews. 23 clients have called asking whether Lux Venues discriminates against families. I calmly accepted the folder. Good. Preserve every timestamp. She looked surprised. You're not angry? I smiled slightly. No. They're building our lawsuit for us. Less than an hour later, my legal team gathered inside the executive conference room. Every attorney already had a copy of the contract Ashley and my father had signed the previous afternoon. Our lead counsel, Amanda Foster, pointed to the highlighted paragraph. The contract is clear. They agreed that any public false statements damaging Lux Venues or its owner would immediately terminate every courtesy discount and expose them to liability for damages. She looked around the room before adding, Ashley violated that agreement less than 30 minutes after signing it. Another attorney projected Ashley's videos onto the conference screen. Frame by frame, they identified every false statement. Every accusation was matched with emails, invoices, security logs, recorded meetings, and signed agreements proving the exact opposite. Amanda closed the presentation. This is no longer a wedding dispute. She looked directly at me. This is commercial defamation. My phone rang before anyone could continue. It was my mother. I answered on speaker. She didn't ask how I was doing. She didn't apologize. She immediately began crying. Rebecca, please, you have to stop this. I remained silent. She continued between sobs. Ashley hasn't slept. Brandon barely speaks to her. His mother keeps asking questions we can't answer. Finally, I spoke. Did Ashley remove the videos? My mother hesitated. No. Has she apologized publicly? No. Has anyone corrected the lies? Another long silence. No, I quietly replied. Then nothing has changed. Suddenly, Ashley grabbed the phone from my mother. Her voice was no longer emotional. It was furious. You think you're smarter than everyone because you own some company? She shouted. Dad always said you got lucky. Without this family, you'd still be nobody. Every attorney in the room stopped writing. Ashley continued before anyone could interrupt her. Everything you have should have belonged to me. Mom and Dad spent their whole lives helping you while I had to fight for attention. I closed my eyes for a brief moment. Even after everything that had happened, she genuinely believed she was the victim. Ashley, I said calmly, are you finished? Not even close. If you don't restore the discount today, I'll keep posting until your company loses every customer. I looked toward Amanda, who quietly nodded while recording the entire conversation. Thank you, I replied. Ashley sounded confused. For what? For making this much easier than I expected. I ended the call. The conference room remained silent for several seconds before Amanda slowly smiled, threatening ongoing reputational harm during a recorded phone call. She closed her notebook. That will look very persuasive in court. Before anyone could speak again, my assistant hurried into the room carrying a sealed envelope marked confidential. Rebecca, she said nervously. This was hand-delivered about 10 minutes ago. I opened the envelope. Inside was a copy of several bank transfer receipts and one handwritten note. The note contained only a single sentence. If Brandon's family discovers where their money really went, the wedding won't be your biggest problem anymore. Amanda immediately took the documents and began reviewing the transfers. After less than a minute, her expression changed completely. Rebecca, she said quietly, these aren't payments to the venue. I looked at the bank records. More than $300,000 transferred by Brandon's family had never reached Lux Venues. Every transfer had been redirected into a private account controlled by someone else. I slowly turned to the signature, authorizing those transactions. My heartbeat stopped for just a moment. The account holder wasn't Ashley. It wasn't my mother. It wasn't even Brandon. It was my father. Suddenly, the wedding was no longer about a family demanding money from me. It had become something far more dangerous. Someone had stolen hundreds of thousands of dollars from Brandon's family, and my father appeared to be standing at the center of it all. I didn't sleep that night, not because I was worried about Ashley's videos or the lawsuit that was quickly taking shape, but because I couldn't stop staring at the bank records lying on my kitchen table. Every transfer had originated from Brandon's family trust. Every payment had been approved for Ashley's wedding expenses, yet not $1 had reached Lux Venues. Instead, the money had quietly disappeared into an account controlled by my father. By sunrise, Amanda had already assembled a forensic accounting team to verify every transaction. At 9 o'clock sharp, she walked into my office carrying a fresh report. The anonymous sender was telling the truth, she said. Every transfer is authentic. She laid several color-coded charts across the conference table. Brandon's family wired $312,000 over the last 5 months. Your father redirected nearly all of it through 2 consulting companies before depositing the funds into his personal investment account. I stared at the report in disbelief. Did Ashley know? Amanda slowly shook her head. We don't know yet. Before I could respond, my assistant rushed into the office. Rebecca, Brandon and Mrs. Collins are here again. They insist they need to speak with you immediately. I asked her to send them in. The moment Brandon entered, I knew something had changed. The calm, patient man I had met only days earlier looked exhausted. His tie was loose, his eyes were bloodshot, and he carried a folder almost identical to mine. Diane entered behind him, her face unreadable as always. She closed the conference room door herself before speaking. Rebecca, our private auditors reached the same conclusion your attorneys did. Brandon placed his folder beside mine. The money my family transferred never reached the venue. I quietly nodded. I know. Brandon looked directly into my eyes. Did your father steal it? I didn't answer immediately. I don't know everything yet. Diane spoke before Brandon could continue. But you know enough. I slowly pushed the forensic report across the table. Brandon opened it, reading every page in complete silence. The color gradually disappeared from his face. When he reached the final chart showing the transfers into my father's personal account, he quietly closed the folder. This explains everything, he whispered. Every time Ashley asked why the venue hadn't been paid, your father said there was a temporary accounting delay. Diane folded her hands together. There was never an accounting delay. There was only theft. The room became silent until my phone suddenly rang. It was my father. Amanda glanced at me before activating the call recorder. I answered on speaker. Rebecca. His voice sounded unusually calm. I'd like us to meet. Just the 2 of us. Why? Because we've both made mistakes. Amanda immediately raised an eyebrow. My father had just admitted more than he realized. I remained silent. He continued. Whatever happens next will destroy this family unless you help me fix it. How? I asked quietly. There was a long pause before he answered. I need you to tell Brandon's family that the venue received every payment. The room fell completely silent. Brandon slowly looked up from the forensic report. Diane's expression hardened, but she said nothing. My father continued speaking, completely unaware that both of them were listening. Once the wedding is over, I'll replace the money. Nobody has to know. I closed my eyes for a moment, struggling to believe what I had just heard. This wasn't panic. This wasn't desperation. It was another lie. Another attempt to protect his reputation by asking me to commit fraud. Rebecca? He asked. Are you still there? I finally answered. Yes. Will you help your family? I looked at Brandon, then at Diane, then at Amanda, who quietly stopped writing because no notes were necessary anymore. Every word was already recorded. No, I replied calmly. I'm going to help the truth. My father immediately lost his temper. You ungrateful little girl, he shouted. Everything you've ever had came from this family. Before I could answer, Brandon reached across the table and quietly pressed the button ending the call. He looked at me for several long seconds before speaking. Rebecca, I owe you an apology. I frowned. For what? His voice broke slightly. For believing your father. Diane slowly stood and walked toward the conference room window. Without turning around, she said something that instantly changed the future of Ashley's wedding. Brandon, she said quietly. Cancel every payment that hasn't cleared. Brandon nodded once. Done. Diane finally turned back toward us. And call Ashley. Brandon looked confused. Why? Diane's voice remained calm, but there was no emotion left in it. Because before she marries into this family, she paused briefly before finishing the sentence. She's going to learn exactly what kind of father she really has. Brandon didn't call off the wedding immediately. Instead, he did something no one expected. He invited both families to dinner at his parents' estate the following Saturday, saying he wanted everyone to clear the air before the wedding. Ashley believed he was trying to save their relationship. My parents believed they could still convince Brandon that I had exaggerated everything. I accepted the invitation because Amanda quietly told me. Sometimes people reveal more over dinner than they ever do during a deposition. The evening began politely enough. Expensive wine was poured, dinner was served, and everyone pretended nothing had happened. Then Brandon placed a sealed envelope in the center of the table. Before we discuss the wedding, he said calmly, I'd like everyone to answer one question. Where did my family's money go? The room fell silent. My father smiled as though he had prepared for this moment. There seems to be a misunderstanding. The venue made an accounting error. Brandon slowly opened the envelope and removed certified bank records. No, he replied. The bank says otherwise. My father immediately changed his story. The money was temporarily invested. Diane looked directly at him. Without our knowledge? He hesitated. I plan to return every dollar. Brandon quietly slid another document across the table. It was an email sent by my father 3 weeks earlier. Ashley leaned forward to read it, and the color instantly drained from her face. The email read, Once the wedding is over, they'll never ask where the money went. Ashley stared at her father in disbelief. You wrote this? He opened his mouth but couldn't answer. Before anyone else could speak, my mother suddenly reached across the table and grabbed Ashley's hand. Sweetheart, your father only did this because he wanted to give you the perfect wedding. Ashley slowly pulled her hand away. So both of you knew? My mother looked down without answering. Brandon remained completely calm. Rebecca, he said, would you show everyone the final document? I opened my briefcase and placed the original executive courtesy agreement on the table beside the $10,000 invoice my parents had mailed to me. Every eye moved from one document to the other. On one side sat a father begging me in writing to save Ashley's wedding with a $150,000 courtesy discount. On the other sat the invoice demanding I pay $10,000 just to attend that same wedding. The contradiction was impossible to explain away. Ashley looked back and forth between the two papers until tears filled her eyes. "Dad," she whispered, "you made Rebecca save my wedding, then charged her to come?" My father finally lost his temper. He slammed both hands onto the dining table. "She can afford it," he shouted. "She has everything. Ashley deserved one day where everything was about her." No one spoke. His words echoed through the room, exposing years of favoritism in a single sentence. Diane slowly stood up and looked at Brandon. "Now you know exactly what kind of family you're marrying into." Brandon didn't answer immediately. Instead, he quietly removed the engagement ring from his pocket and placed it on the table in front of Ashley. "I don't want an answer tonight," he said softly. "I only want the truth. If you already knew about any of this, our relationship ends here. If you didn't know, then prove it." Ashley looked at the ring, then at her parents, who couldn't even look her in the eyes anymore. For the first time in her life, she realized the people she had trusted most had built her dream wedding on lies. Then she did something none of us expected. She slowly stood, turned toward her father, and said, "Give Brandon's family back every dollar, or tomorrow morning I'll tell the police everything I know." My father's face turned completely white. He had spent his entire life controlling Ashley. He never imagined she would become the first person willing to destroy him. Ashley left Brandon's parents' estate without saying a single word. She ignored every call from my mother during the drive home and walked straight into my parents' house, carrying nothing except the engagement ring Brandon had returned. My father was sitting in the living room with a glass of whiskey, convinced she had gone to calm Brandon down. The moment he saw her, he smiled. "Good. I knew you'd fix this." Ashley quietly placed the ring on the coffee table. "The wedding is over." The smile disappeared from his face. "Don't be ridiculous. Brandon canceled everything." My father stood so quickly his chair nearly tipped over. "Because of Rebecca." Ashley slowly shook her head. "No, because of you." My mother rushed into the room. "Ashley, sweetheart, don't say things you'll regret." Ashley looked at both of them with tears in her eyes. "For my entire life you told me Rebecca was selfish. You told me she never cared about this family. But she secretly gave us a $150,000 wedding venue, and you thanked her by sending her a $10,000 invoice." Neither of my parents answered. Ashley continued, her voice growing stronger with every sentence. "Then you stole Brandon's family's money. Then you lied to me. Then you asked Rebecca to lie for you." My father slammed his hand against the table. "Enough!" Ashley didn't flinch. "No, Dad." I'm finally listening instead of obeying. My father pointed toward the front door. "Everything I've done was for you." Ashley laughed bitterly. "No. Everything you did was so people would think you were rich." The room fell silent. For the first time in years, someone had said out loud what everyone else had been too afraid to admit. My father slowly lowered his voice. "Listen carefully. If anyone asks, you tell them Brandon misunderstood the bank records. You tell them Rebecca manipulated everyone." Ashley stared at him in disbelief. "You still want me to lie?" "It's the only way to save this family." She slowly picked up the engagement ring again. "There isn't a family left to save." She turned toward the staircase. My father grabbed her arm before she could leave. "You're not walking away from me." Ashley pulled her arm free. "I already have." She walked upstairs and locked herself inside her bedroom. 20 minutes later, my phone rang. Ashley's name appeared on the screen. I hesitated before answering. Neither of us spoke for several seconds. Finally, she whispered, "Rebecca, were you really going to give me that venue for free?" I looked out my apartment window at the city lights before answering. "Yes, even after everything." I wanted one happy memory between us. On the other end of the line, I heard her begin crying. "I never knew." "Because you never asked." Another long silence followed. Then Ashley quietly said something I never expected to hear. "Dad has a safe in his home office." I frowned. "What kind of safe?" "He never lets anyone touch it. Last month I accidentally walked in while he was putting stacks of documents inside. When he saw me, he slammed it shut." My heartbeat quickened. "Why are you telling me this now?" Ashley took a deep breath. Because tonight, I finally realized Brandon wasn't asking me to choose between him and my family. She paused before finishing. He was asking me to choose between the truth and the lies I've been living with my entire life. Before I could respond, someone began pounding on Ashley's bedroom door. My father's voice echoed through the phone. Ashley, open this door right now, she whispered quickly. Tomorrow morning I'm leaving the house. If Dad gets to that safe first. Her voice broke for just a second. Everything inside it will disappear. Then the call suddenly ended. I stared at my phone for several seconds before immediately calling Amanda. She answered on the first ring. I spoke only 5 words. We need a court order. Tonight. Amanda had already anticipated my call. By the time I reached her office just after midnight, 2 litigation attorneys, a retired judge serving as a legal consultant, and a digital forensic specialist were waiting inside the conference room. A large map of my parents' property covered one wall, while copies of the executive courtesy agreement, the bank records, and Ashley's recorded phone call were spread across the table. Amanda looked up the moment I entered. Tell me everything, Ashley said. I repeated every word as accurately as I could, including her description of the safe hidden inside my father's home office. When I finished, the retired judge slowly folded his hands. If those documents relate to the missing funds or the fraudulent scheme, there's a significant risk they could be destroyed before normal business hours. Amanda nodded. That's exactly what concerns me. Within 30 minutes, she filed an emergency motion requesting a preservation order, arguing that evidence connected to an ongoing civil fraud case faced an immediate risk of destruction. The duty judge reviewed the supporting affidavits through the court's emergency filing system. At 2:17 a.m., the signed order arrived. Amanda quietly smiled. We got it. Before sunrise, court-appointed officers, accompanied by digital evidence specialists, arrived at my parents' home. They weren't there to arrest anyone. They were there for one purpose, only to preserve evidence exactly as it existed before anyone could alter or destroy it. My father opened the front door wearing yesterday's clothes. The confidence he had carried for weeks vanished the moment he read the court order. You can't search my house, he protested. The lead officer calmly replied, We're not conducting a criminal search. We're preserving evidence under court authority. My father immediately stepped backward. There's nothing here. At that exact moment, Ashley walked downstairs carrying a small suitcase. She had clearly been awake all night. She looked at me standing near Amanda without saying a word. Then she quietly pointed toward the hallway. His office is the last door on the left. My father's face turned pale. Ashley. She didn't even look at him. I'm done protecting your lies. The officers entered the office while digital specialists photographed every drawer, every cabinet, every computer, and every storage device before touching anything. Finally, one investigator stopped in front of a large oil painting hanging behind the desk. Ashley quietly spoke. Behind that, the painting was lifted from the wall, revealing a hidden electronic safe. My father instinctively stepped forward. You can't open that. Amanda calmly handed the preservation order to the lead officer. The court anticipated that objection. A certified locksmith entered the room. Less than 5 minutes later, the safe door slowly swung open. No stacks of cash appeared, no expensive jewelry. Instead, shelf after shelf was filled with neatly labeled binders, external hard drives, signed contracts, and sealed envelopes. The digital specialist carefully removed the first hard drive and connected it to a forensic imaging device without altering the original data. Within seconds, hundreds of folders appeared on the monitor. One folder immediately caught everyone's attention. Rebecca payments. My heartbeat accelerated. Amanda opened the folder. Inside were spreadsheets documenting every occasion my father had borrowed money from me over the previous 10 years. Next to each payment appeared handwritten notes. Don't tell Rebecca the real reason. Ask, after Ashley calls crying. She always says yes, if we make it about family. My hands slowly tightened. I had always believed I was helping during emergencies. Instead, every request had been carefully planned. Amanda quietly opened another folder labeled Wedding Strategy. The first document made the entire room fall silent. It wasn't written by Ashley. It wasn't written by my mother. It was a detailed checklist created by my father months before the invitations were mailed. One line near the bottom read, "Send Rebecca a VIP invoice. If she refuses, guilt her into paying. If she accepts, use her payment to cover the venue shortfall." Ashley covered her mouth as tears rolled down her face. "He planned all of this," she whispered. Amanda continued searching the files until another document appeared. This one was addressed to a public relations consultant. "If Rebecca refuses to cooperate, launch a sympathy campaign portraying Ashley as the victim. Encourage social media pressure before legal action begins." Amanda slowly looked up at me. "Rebecca," she said quietly. "Ashley's videos weren't her idea." I stared at the screen in complete disbelief. My father hadn't simply manipulated money. He had manipulated every member of our family, turning us against one another while he quietly controlled the story from the shadows. Then the forensic specialist opened the final sealed envelope recovered from the safe. Inside was a signed confession, but it wasn't my father's signature. It belonged to someone none of us expected. Amanda read the first line aloud, and the entire room froze. "This statement was voluntarily written by your mother 6 months ago." Amanda had already anticipated my call. By the time I reached her office just after midnight, 2 litigation attorneys, a retired judge serving as a legal consultant, and a digital forensic specialist were waiting inside the conference room. A large map of my parents' property covered one wall, while copies of the executive courtesy agreement, the bank records, and Ashley's recorded phone call were spread across the table. Amanda looked up the moment I entered. "Tell me everything," Ashley said. I repeated every word as accurately as I could, including her description of the safe hidden inside my father's home office. When I finished, the retired judge slowly folded his hands. "If those documents relate to the missing funds or the fraudulent scheme, there's a significant risk they could be destroyed before normal business hours." Amanda nodded. "That's exactly what concerns me." Within 30 minutes, she filed an emergency motion requesting a preservation order, arguing that evidence connected to an ongoing civil fraud case faced an immediate risk of destruction. The duty judge reviewed the supporting affidavits through the court's emergency filing system. At 2:17 a.m., the signed order arrived. Amanda quietly smiled. "We got it." Before sunrise, court-appointed officers, accompanied by digital evidence specialists, arrived at my parents' home. They weren't there to arrest anyone. They were there for one purpose, only to preserve evidence exactly as it existed before anyone could alter or destroy it. My father opened the front door wearing yesterday's clothes. The confidence he had carried for weeks vanished the moment he read the court order. "You can't search my house," he protested. The lead officer calmly replied, "We're not conducting a criminal search. We're preserving evidence under court authority." My father immediately stepped backward. "There's nothing here." At that exact moment, Ashley walked downstairs carrying a small suitcase. She had clearly been awake all night. She looked at me standing near Amanda without saying a word. Then she quietly pointed toward the hallway. "His office is the last door on the left." My father's face turned pale. "Ashley." She didn't even look at him. "I'm done protecting your lies." The officers entered the office while digital specialists photographed every drawer, every cabinet, every computer, and every storage device before touching anything. Finally, one investigator stopped in front of a large oil painting hanging behind the desk. Ashley quietly spoke. "Behind that." The painting was lifted from the wall, revealing a hidden electronic safe. My father instinctively stepped forward. "You can't open that." Amanda calmly handed the preservation order to the lead officer. The court anticipated that objection. A certified locksmith entered the room. Less than 5 minutes later, the safe door slowly swung open. No stacks of cash appeared, no expensive jewelry. Instead, shelf after shelf was filled with neatly labeled binders, external hard drives, signed contracts, and sealed envelopes. The digital specialist carefully removed the first hard drive and connected it to a forensic imaging device without altering the original data. Within seconds, hundreds of folders appeared on the monitor. One folder immediately caught everyone's attention: Rebecca payments. My heartbeat accelerated. Amanda opened the folder. Inside were spreadsheets documenting every occasion my father had borrowed money from me over the previous 10 years. Next to each payment appeared handwritten notes. Don't tell Rebecca the real reason. Ask after Ashley calls crying. She always says yes if we make it about family. My hands slowly tightened. I had always believed I was helping during emergencies. Instead, every request had been carefully planned. Amanda quietly opened another folder labeled Wedding Strategy. The first document made the entire room fall silent. It wasn't written by Ashley. It wasn't written by my mother. It was a detailed checklist created by my father months before the invitations were mailed. One line near the bottom read, "Send Rebecca a VIP invoice. If she refuses, guilt her into paying. If she accepts, use her payment to cover the venue shortfall." Ashley covered her mouth as tears rolled down her face. "He planned all of this," she whispered. Amanda continued searching the files until another document appeared. This one was addressed to a public relations consultant. If Rebecca refuses to cooperate, launch a sympathy campaign portraying Ashley as the victim. Encourage social media pressure before legal action begins. Amanda slowly looked up at me. "Rebecca," she said quietly. Ashley's videos weren't her idea. I stared at the screen in complete disbelief. My father hadn't simply manipulated money. He had manipulated every member of our family, turning us against one another while he quietly controlled the story from the shadows. Then, the forensic specialist opened the final sealed envelope recovered from the safe. Inside was a signed confession. But it wasn't my father's signature. It belonged to someone none of us expected. Amanda read the first line aloud, and the entire room froze. "This statement was voluntarily written by your mother, 6 months ago." 3 days later, every seat inside the county courthouse was filled before the hearing even began. Reporters lined the back rows. Legal analysts whispered predictions to television producers. Outside, satellite trucks crowded the parking lot while headlines across the country repeated the same question. Did a father steal from both of his daughters to finance a wedding built on lies? I ignored every camera as Amanda and I walked through the courthouse entrance. "Remember," she said quietly, "today isn't about winning public opinion. Today is about presenting facts." I nodded without speaking. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't angry. I wasn't afraid. I was simply tired of carrying a truth that no one had wanted to hear. Across the courtroom, my father looked completely different from the man who had once lectured me about loyalty. His expensive, tailored suits had been replaced by a plain navy jacket. His confident smile was gone. My mother sat beside him, staring at her hands. Ashley sat alone several seats away from both of them. Brandon and Diane occupied the first row behind Amanda's table, attending only because they had been subpoenaed as witnesses. When Judge Eleanor Watkins entered, the courtroom immediately fell silent. After reviewing several procedural matters, she looked toward Amanda. "Counsel, you may begin." Amanda stood and calmly approached the center of the courtroom carrying only one thin binder. "Your Honor," she began, "this case is not about a failed wedding. It is not about a disagreement between sisters. It is about years of calculated financial deception disguised as family responsibility." She paused before placing a single document onto the evidence screen. It wasn't a bank statement. It wasn't an accounting report. It was the $10,000 invoice my parents had mailed to me. The judge studied it carefully. Amanda continued. "The defendants demanded that Rebecca Carter pay $10,000 simply to attend her own sister's wedding. She then placed a second document beside the first. The original executive courtesy agreement appeared on the courtroom monitor. On the very same day," Amanda continued, "Rebecca Carter was secretly providing this family with a $150,000 executive courtesy discount they could never have afforded on their own." A quiet murmur spread across the courtroom. Judge Watkins looked from one document to the other several times before speaking. These documents were executed within 24 hours of each other? Yes, Your Honor, Amanda replied. One shows extraordinary generosity, the other shows extraordinary exploitation. My father's attorney immediately stood. Objection. Counsel is arguing emotion instead of law. Judge Watkins looked toward Amanda. Do you intend to connect these documents to the legal claims before this court? Amanda smiled politely. Yes, Your Honor. She pressed a button on the courtroom monitor. A timeline appeared showing every request my father had made for money over the previous 10 years, every so-called emergency, every promise to repay, every transfer from my accounts. Then Amanda highlighted the final column. Total financial assistance provided by Rebecca Carter, $1,487,630. The entire courtroom became silent. Even my father's attorney slowly lowered his pen. Amanda calmly spoke again. Nearly $1.5 million. None of these transfers were loans requested by strangers. Everyone was requested by her own father under the promise that the family needed help. Judge Watkins looked directly toward my father. Is this amount disputed? His attorney quietly whispered something to him before standing again. The amount is substantially accurate, Your Honor. Another wave of whispers spread through the gallery. Amanda wasn't finished. She called the court clerk to display the handwritten notes recovered from the hidden safe. One sentence appeared on the large courtroom monitor for everyone to read. Rebecca always says yes if we make it about family. Amanda let the words hang in the air before speaking again. Your Honor, this single sentence summarizes the entire case. The defendant did not borrow because he had no options. He manipulated because he knew exactly which emotions would guarantee another payment. My father slowly lowered his head. For the first time since this case began, he couldn't even look in my direction. Judge Watkins remained silent for several moments before looking toward Amanda. Counsel, she said quietly, I believe the court is beginning to understand the pattern. Amanda gently closed the binder. Your Honor, she replied. With the court's permission, the next witness will explain how that pattern eventually became criminal fraud. Then she turned toward the courtroom doors and calmly called the one witness no one expected to testify against my father. The plaintiff calls Ashley Carter. The entire courtroom turned toward the back of the room as Ashley slowly stood to her feet, took a deep breath, and began walking toward the witness stand. My father finally looked up, and the fear on his face told me he already knew what she was about to say. Ashley slowly walked toward the witness stand as though every step weighed 100 pounds. Only a few weeks earlier she had believed this courtroom would never exist because her wedding would already be over and her perfect life would be beginning. Instead, she now found herself preparing to testify against the man she had trusted for her entire life. After taking the oath, she avoided looking at my father altogether. Amanda approached the witness stand calmly. Miss Carter, did you love your father? Ashley answered without hesitation. More than anyone. Did you trust him? Completely. Amanda nodded. Did you know he had secretly accepted a $150,000 executive courtesy discount from your sister? No. Did you know he mailed your sister a $10,000 invoice to attend your wedding? Ashley slowly lowered her head. No. Did you know he received more than $300,000 from Brandon Collins' family? No. Amanda paused for a moment before asking the question everyone in the courtroom had been waiting for. When did you first realize your father had been lying to you? Ashley looked toward the judge before quietly answering. The night Brandon showed me the bank records. The courtroom remained silent. Amanda handed Ashley a copy of the email recovered from the hidden safe. Have you ever seen this document before? Ashley read only the first few lines before tears filled her eyes again. No. Amanda looked toward the judge. Please read the highlighted sentence aloud. Ashley's voice trembled as she read. Rebecca won't say no if we make her believe my happiness depends on her. She stopped reading and covered her mouth with one hand. Amanda gently asked, Who wrote those words? Ashley looked toward my father for the first time since entering the courtroom. My dad. A heavy silence settled across the room. Amanda continued carefully. Did your father ever tell you he planned to charge Rebecca $10,000? No. Did he ever tell you he intended to use her payment to cover the missing wedding funds? Ashley shook her head. Never. Amanda stepped closer. Did your sister ever ask you for money? Ashley immediately answered. No. Did she ever threaten to cancel your wedding? No. Did she ever ask for anything in return after giving your family a $150,000 discount? Ashley's eyes filled with regret. No. Amanda nodded once before sitting down. No further questions. My father's attorney slowly stood and approached the witness stand. He smiled politely. Miss Carter, despite everything that's happened, your father still loves you, doesn't he? Ashley remained silent for several seconds. I think he loved controlling me. The attorney hesitated before trying another approach. Your father only wanted you to have a beautiful wedding. Ashley looked directly at him. Then he should have paid for it with his own money. Several people in the courtroom quietly nodded. The attorney tried again. Isn't it possible your father simply made poor financial decisions under tremendous pressure? Ashley slowly reached into her purse and removed the engagement ring Brandon had returned to her weeks earlier. She placed it gently on the witness stand where everyone could see it. This ring was supposed to remind me of the happiest day of my life. Her voice became steadier with every word. Now it reminds me of every lie my father told to build that day. The attorney realized he was losing control of the testimony. Miss Carter. Ashley interrupted him for the first time. For years I blamed Rebecca because my parents blamed Rebecca. I believed every story they told me because I never stopped to ask whether it was true. She turned toward me, tears running freely down her face. Rebecca, I'm sorry. I didn't speak, I simply gave her a small nod. It wasn't forgiveness, it was acknowledgement. Ashley then faced the judge again. Your Honor, I came here today expecting to lose my father. She took a slow breath before continuing. The truth is, I lost him a long time ago. I just didn't know it until now. Judge Watkins quietly removed her glasses and looked down at the evidence covering the bench. Even the courtroom reporters had stopped typing. No one wanted to interrupt the silence. Then Amanda slowly stood once more. Your Honor, she said calmly, the plaintiff calls its final witness. The courtroom doors opened, and a gray-haired forensic document examiner walked inside carrying a sealed evidence case. Amanda looked toward the judge before speaking the words that immediately caught everyone's attention. The next witness will prove that the defendant's fraud didn't begin with Ashley's wedding. She paused briefly. It began years before Rebecca ever became successful. The gray-haired forensic document examiner introduced himself as Dr. Thomas Reynolds, a former chief forensic analyst with more than 30 years of experience investigating financial fraud, forged contracts, and document manipulation. After taking the oath, he placed a sealed evidence case on the witness stand and looked directly at Judge Watkins. Your Honor, I was asked to examine every financial document recovered during this investigation, including handwritten agreements, loan requests, contracts, banking instructions, and electronic records spanning more than 12 years. Amanda approached the witness stand carrying only one folder. Dr. Reynolds, did you discover evidence of forgery? Yes. How many forged documents? 23. A quiet murmur spread across the courtroom. Amanda continued. Were these isolated incidents? Dr. Reynolds slowly shook his head. No. They demonstrate a consistent pattern. The courtroom monitor lit up as the first document appeared. It was a family loan agreement from nearly 11 years earlier bearing what appeared to be my signature. Dr. Reynolds pointed toward several enlarged sections. At first glance, the signature appears authentic. Under microscopic analysis, however, it is clear the signature was digitally transferred from an earlier employment contract and mechanically reproduced. Amanda displayed a second document, then a third, then a fourth. Every one carried my name. Every one had been submitted to banks, lenders, or private investors over the years. Dr. Reynolds calmly explained each discrepancy, showing identical pen pressure, repeated ink patterns, and digital replication marks impossible to produce through natural handwriting. Judge Watkins leaned forward. Dr. Reynolds, Are you saying these signatures were copied rather than written? Yes, Your Honor. With scientific certainty? Yes. Amanda quietly turned toward the jury box reserved for advisory findings and then faced the judge once again. Your Honor, the plaintiff would now like to establish why these forged documents matter. She pressed another button. A financial timeline filled the courtroom screen. Every forged agreement matched a loan my father had secretly obtained. Every loan corresponded to money he later claimed had been borrowed to help Ashley save the family home or cover unexpected emergencies. Then Amanda highlighted the final column. Total debt created using Rebecca Carter's identity, $2,764,000. The courtroom fell completely silent. My father slowly closed his eyes. My mother covered her mouth with trembling hands. Ashley stared at the screen as though she could no longer recognize the man sitting beside her. Amanda spoke quietly. Your Honor, Rebecca Carter didn't simply finance this family. She paused before finishing the sentence. Her identity financed it. My father's attorney immediately stood. Objection. Counsel is making conclusions beyond the witness's testimony. Judge Watkins looked toward Dr. Reynolds. Can you answer that statement? Dr. Reynolds nodded. Based on the documents I examined, the defendant repeatedly relied upon Rebecca Carter's financial credibility to obtain money he otherwise could not have borrowed. Without her identity, many of these loans would likely never have been approved. My father suddenly stood up. That's a lie! Everyone turned toward him. Judge Watkins struck her gavel once. Mr. Carter, sit down immediately. He ignored her. Rebecca never lost a dollar because of those loans. Amanda calmly walked to the evidence table and lifted one final binder. Actually, she replied quietly. She did. She opened the binder to a single page and handed it to the bailiff, who delivered it directly to the judge. Judge Watkins read silently for nearly 30 seconds before looking back at me. Miss Carter, according to these records, you were denied a commercial loan 6 years ago because your debt-to-income ratio appeared too high. Amanda nodded. That commercial loan would have allowed Rebecca Carter to expand her business years earlier. She turned toward my father. The reason she was denied. She paused briefly before continuing. Was because the defendant had already used her financial identity to secure multiple undisclosed obligations. I felt my chest tighten. For years, I had blamed myself for losing the opportunity to expand my company. I had worked longer hours, accepted fewer contracts, and sacrificed opportunities because I believed I simply hadn't qualified. I never imagined my own father had quietly closed those doors before I ever reached them. Ashley suddenly looked toward him, tears streaming down her face once again. You didn't just steal money, she whispered. You stole her future. No one answered her. They didn't need to. Every document, every expert opinion, every financial record now told the exact same story. Amanda slowly closed the final binder before looking toward Judge Watkins. Your Honor, she said calmly, the plaintiff rests. The courtroom remained silent for several long seconds. Then Judge Watkins removed her glasses, looked directly at my father, and spoke in a voice so calm it sent chills through the entire room. Mr. Carter. She paused briefly. Before this court announces its findings, is there anything you wish to say under oath? Every camera in the courtroom immediately turned toward my father. For the first time since the trial had begun, he had nowhere left to hide. My father remained standing for several long seconds without saying a word. The confidence that had defined him for most of his life had completely disappeared. Every lie he had told, every document he had forged, and every manipulation he had carefully planned now sat in neatly organized binders only a few feet away from him. Judge Watkins waited patiently. Mr. Carter, she repeated, this is your opportunity to address the court. He slowly looked around the courtroom. His eyes stopped briefly on my mother, then Ashley, then finally settled on me. For the first time in years, there was no anger in his expression, only exhaustion. He cleared his throat before speaking. I never wanted any of this. Amanda didn't move. Neither did I. Judge Watkins simply replied, continue. He took a deep breath. Everything started with one bad investment, then another. Every time I lost money, I believed I could recover it before anyone noticed. Every lie required another lie. Every loan required another loan. Eventually, I stopped thinking about right and wrong. I only thought about surviving. He looked toward Ashley. I wanted to give my little girl the wedding she deserved. Ashley slowly shook her head. No, Dad. Tears filled her eyes again. You wanted people to believe you could afford it. The courtroom fell silent. My father lowered his head but didn't deny it. Then he looked at me. Rebecca. His voice broke for the first time. You always helped me. I remained silent. I kept telling myself I'd repay every dollar. He paused. Then the debt became too large. Amanda finally stood. Your Honor, intention does not erase fraud. Judge Watkins nodded. The court agrees. She reviewed her notes for several moments before announcing her findings. Based upon the overwhelming documentary evidence, expert testimony, financial records, and the defendant's own admissions, this court finds that Richard Carter knowingly engaged in fraud, conversion of funds, breach of fiduciary duty, forgery, and intentional financial deception. Every person in the courtroom remained completely silent. Judge Watkins continued. Judgment is entered in favor of Rebecca Carter. She then began reading the court's orders one by one. Every fraudulent transfer was declared void. Every forged agreement was canceled. Every debt created using my identity was removed from my financial history. The court ordered full financial restitution, punitive damages, reimbursement of every legal expense, and the immediate liquidation of Richard Carter's remaining business interests to satisfy the judgment. The clerk continued writing while Judge Watkins read the final order. This matter is further referred to the appropriate prosecuting authorities for consideration of any criminal charges supported by the evidence presented during these proceedings. My father slowly closed his eyes. He understood exactly what those words meant. The civil case had ended. The criminal process was only beginning. My mother quietly began crying. Ashley remained perfectly still, staring at the floor as though she could no longer recognize the family she had spent her entire life defending. Judge Watkins looked toward me one final time. Miss Carter, this court cannot return the years you lost because of these actions. She paused briefly. But the law can restore your name, your financial record, and your legal rights. I simply nodded. That was enough. As the judge prepared to leave the bench, my father suddenly spoke again. Rebecca. I turned toward him. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. Another long silence followed. But, I'm sorry. For years I had imagined what that apology might sound like. I thought it would make me feel victorious. Instead, I felt nothing except peace. I looked at him calmly before answering. I hope one day you become the man I spent my childhood believing you already were. Those were the last words I ever spoke to him inside a courtroom. As deputies escorted him toward the exit, reporters rushed into the hall, cameras flashing from every direction. Everyone wanted a statement. Everyone wanted a dramatic ending. They didn't get one. Because the greatest victory wasn't watching my father lose everything. The greatest victory was realizing that, for the first time in my life, I no longer needed his approval to know my own worth. As I walked out of the courthouse beside Amanda, Brandon, Diane, and Ashley, the afternoon sunlight broke through the clouds outside. Amanda smiled quietly before saying, Rebecca, there's one last thing you should know. I looked at her. She handed me a sealed envelope that had arrived only minutes earlier. It was delivered this morning by your grandmother's attorney. I looked down at the familiar handwriting on the front. It was addressed simply to me. Open only after the trial is over. When I returned home that evening, I placed my grandmother's sealed envelope on the kitchen table and simply stared at it for several minutes. It had survived an entire trial, years of family betrayal, and more lies than I cared to remember. Somehow, opening it felt harder than facing my father in court. Finally, I broke the seal. Inside was a handwritten letter, and a small brass key attached to a faded ribbon I immediately recognized. It was the spare key to my grandmother's old lake cabin, the place where I had spent nearly every summer as a little girl before life became complicated. I unfolded the letter with trembling hands. My dearest Rebecca, it began, if you are reading this, then everything I feared has already happened. I wish I could tell you I was surprised, but I have watched this family slowly confuse love with obligation for many years. Your father believed money could protect his pride. Your mother believed silence could protect her marriage. Ashley believed admiration was the same thing as love. I don't blame any of them for becoming who they became. I only pray they someday become better. Tears slowly rolled down my face as I continued reading. There is one thing I need you to promise me. Do not let their choices decide the kind of woman you become. Bitterness is the only inheritance that grows heavier every year. Leave it behind. Folded inside the letter was one final document. It was the deed transferring ownership of the lake cabin into my name years before my grandmother died. On the back, she had written one simple sentence. This was always your home, even on the days you believed you didn't have one. The following weekend, I drove to the cabin alone. The place looked almost exactly as I remembered. The old wooden porch creaked beneath my feet, the wind carried the scent of pine trees across the lake, and the small swing my grandfather had built decades earlier still hung beneath the enormous oak tree overlooking the water. I sat there for hours, thinking not about the trial or the money, but about the little girl who had spent her childhood believing she had to earn love by fixing everyone else's problems. For the first time, I realized that little girl had finally grown up. A month later, every judgment ordered by the court had been finalized. My financial record was fully restored. Every fraudulent debt disappeared. My company continued growing, not because I had won the lawsuit, but because my clients saw how calmly and honestly we handled every accusation. The public eventually learned the full truth, and the same media outlets that had once criticized me published corrections and apologies. Ashley accepted responsibility for the lies she had repeated online. She recorded one final public video not to defend herself, but to tell the truth. She admitted Rebecca had secretly paid for the wedding venue, admitted she had believed her father's stories without questioning them, and publicly apologized for every false accusation she had made against both me and Lux Venues. After posting that video, she quietly disappeared from social media, found an ordinary job, rented a small apartment, and began rebuilding her life without expecting anyone else to rescue her. It was the first truly independent decision I had ever seen her make, and I sincerely hoped it would not be her last. My mother chose a different path. After the trial, she filed for divorce, sold the family home, and began volunteering at a local community center helping women recover from financial abuse. She later wrote me several letters. I read every one of them. I never hated her, but some relationships cannot return to what they once were simply because an apology has finally arrived. As for my father, the criminal proceedings continued long after the civil case ended. He eventually accepted responsibility for his actions and entered a guilty plea rather than forcing more victims to relive the evidence through another lengthy trial. The judge sentenced him according to the law, but the greatest punishment had already happened long before the sentence was announced. He had lost the trust of the two daughters he claimed to love most. No prison could ever be harsher than that. Nearly a year after everything ended, Lux Venues established the Eleanor Carter Scholarship, providing financial assistance each year to young women forced to pay for college without family support. During the opening ceremony, a reporter asked why I had named the scholarship after my grandmother instead of myself. I smiled and answered honestly, because she taught me that generosity should never ask for applause. As the audience applauded, I looked toward the front row where Brandon and Diane sat proudly supporting the scholarship. Ashley was there too, quietly volunteering with the event staff instead of standing in the spotlight. She smiled at me from across the room, and for the first time in our lives, there was no jealousy between us, only mutual respect earned the hard way. Later that evening, I returned to the lake cabin carrying my grandmother's letter in my pocket. I sat on the old swing as the sun slowly disappeared behind the mountains, listening to the water gently touch the shore. I finally understood what my grandmother had tried to teach me all those years. Winning wasn't watching the people who hurt me lose everything. Winning was refusing to become the kind of person they expected me to become. They tried to use my kindness as a weakness, my success as a wallet, and my love for family as a weapon against me. In the end, they lost everything that could be counted in dollars. I walked away with the one thing they could never steal: my integrity. And looking across that quiet lake, I realized my grandmother had been right all along. The greatest inheritance anyone can receive isn't wealth. It's the courage to choose truth over comfort, dignity over revenge, and kindness over bitterness, even after the people you loved gave you every reason not to.